They warned me to keep quiet about the missing page, sir. Dante Moretti's silver fountain pen stopped so close to the signature line that the ink almost touched his name. The private study went still around him, not quiet in the ordinary way, but in the way a room becomes quiet when every person inside it understands that one small sound has changed the night. Under the brass lamp on Dante's dark oak desk lay a black leather folder, an ownership packet, a transfer schedule, and a property map marked for the meeting waiting downstairs. Everything looked clean. Everything looked prepared. Everything looked ready for one signature to make it real. Dante, a white man in a tailored black suit, sat with his Moretti family ring catching the lamp light, his father's old gold watch resting near the edge of his cuff. Then Nora Whitaker stood at the side door with both hands stretched forward, holding a wrinkled sheet of paper as if it were too heavy for a 9-year-old girl. She was white, small in an old cream cardigan and brown Mary Jane shoes, with a white flower clip slipping loose in her hair. She should not have been there. Children of maids did not walk into Dante Moretti's private study while lawyers waited, family watched, and a waterfront property sat one breath away from changing hands. Behind her, Clara Whitaker reached the doorway, one hand pressed against the frame, her face pale with the kind of fear that had learned to stay polite in expensive houses. "Nora," Clara whispered, but the little girl did not step back. She lowered her head and held the paper higher. Dante did not take it at first. His eyes moved from Nora's trembling fingers to the sheet, then to the open folder beneath the lamp. At the bottom of the wrinkled page was the number 12. Near one corner, a raised seal shaped like a wreath pressed through the paper. A faint blue smear marked the margin. Beneath a hard fold, one line showed part of his name, Dante Moretti. Matteo Moretti stood near the fireplace, Dante's younger brother, wearing concern like a tailored jacket. Victor Hale, the chief lawyer, stood beside the leather chair with his hands folded. Lydia Crane, the legal assistant, stood near the file cabinet, a yellow legal pad pressed tightly against her chest. When Nora said missing page, Matteo did not look at the paper. He looked at Lydia. It lasted less than a second, too short for most adults to catch. But Nora had spent her life in back halls, laundry rooms, and quiet corners where grown-ups forgot children could see. She noticed. Dante noticed Nora noticing. "Where did you get that?" he asked. His voice was low, exact, and cold enough to make even the brass lamp feel warm. Nora swallowed. "Near the paper bin in the small office," she said. "It was not gone, sir. It was hidden where they thought only trash would look." Victor gave a soft breath, almost polite enough to hide the dismissal inside it. "Mr. Moretti, this is likely a discarded draft. A child can mistake working papers for executed documents." Nora's cheeks flushed, but she did not argue. She looked at the black folder instead. "It was inside before," she said. "Between 11 and 13. Dante finally took the page by its cleanest edge and placed it under the lamp beside the open folder. He did not smooth it. He did not slide it. He only looked. Inside the folder, page 11 sat neatly on top of page 13. The missing number did not shout. It waited quietly, the way a lie waits when it believes no one will count. Dante set the silver pen down. It rolled once and stopped against the wrinkled page. Lydia's thumb moved along the edge of her legal pad, and a faint blue stain near her nail caught the light. Nora saw it and looked down too quickly. Matteo stepped forward with a gentle smile that did not reach his eyes. "Dante, the meeting is waiting. We cannot delay an entire transfer because Clara's little girl found crumpled paper." Clara flinched, but Nora stayed still. Dante looked from page 11 to page 13, then to page 12 lying outside the folder like a witness left in the cold. "Nobody touches this folder," he said. Victor's hands loosened. Lydia went still. Matteo's smile thinned. Dante turned back to Nora. "Who warned you to keep quiet?" Nora opened her mouth, then looked at her mother. Her small fingers curled into her sleeves. "They said if I remembered page 12, she whispered. "Mama would be the one blamed." Clara's breath caught at the edge of the study, but she did not step forward until Dante looked at her. The fear in Nora's last words had changed the shape of the room. A moment earlier, The wrinkled page had been only an interruption, a child holding paper where powerful men expected silence. Now it sat under the brass lamp beside the black folder like a witness no one had invited but everyone had to face. Victor Hale moved first, not with his hands, but with his voice. "Mr. Moretti," he said, smooth and careful. "We should not allow a frightened child to turn document control into an accusation. Page numbering changes during revisions. Drafts are removed. Tabs are replaced. This is ordinary procedure before a transfer." Nora looked down at her brown Mary Jane shoes. Ordinary was the word adults used when something felt wrong but they wanted small people to stop asking about it. Matteo Moretti nodded slowly, his face full of concern arranged for Dante, not for Nora. Exactly. She heard pieces of adult conversations. She found a discarded sheet. "Clara's daughter meant no harm, but we have men waiting downstairs and a schedule to keep." Clara stepped closer then, just enough that her hand hovered near Nora's shoulder. "Sir, Nora would never take anything from your desk." Victor turned toward her with a polite expression that made the warning feel cleaner. "No one is saying she did, Miss Whitaker, but private documents found in a child's hands create questions." Nora's shoulders tightened. She understood what had happened without understanding the law. The missing page was becoming less about the folder and more about her mother. Dante did not answer Victor. He looked at the folder. "Read the table of contents." Victor reached toward the first sheet. Dante's eyes lifted. Without moving the pages, Victor's fingers stopped above the desk, then lowered. Lydia Crane shifted beside the file cabinet, the yellow legal pad pressed against her chest. "I prepared the index," she said. The packet listed 13 pages before final review, but the final packet contains only the operative documents. Dante looked at her thumb. The faint blue stain near the nail caught the lamp again. "The index says 13, he said. "The packet contains 12. Lydia swallowed. "That can happen during finalization." "And the tab?" Dante asked. Edmund Price, standing near the study door, looked along the cream-colored tabs on the folder's edge. The markers ran in a neat line until one place broke the rhythm between 11 and 13. No torn label lay on the desk. No replacement tab sat nearby. The empty space looked too clean for an accident. Victor gave a controlled sigh. "Tabs are office aids, not legal instruments." Nora lifted her eyes. "But it had one this morning," she whispered. Matteo turned to her with a soft smile that made Clara's hand settle firmly on her daughter's shoulder. "Nora, sweetheart, legal files are not schoolbooks." Nora's cheeks went red, but she kept looking at the numbers. Page 11. Page 13. The gap was simple enough to survive every expensive word in the room. "In my spelling book," she said, "if 11 goes to 13, the teacher says something is missing." No one laughed. The sentence was too small to fight and too clear to bury. Dante lowered his gaze to the metal spine of the folder. Near the lower clamp, a fresh scratch flashed against the dark hardware. He pointed to it. When was the spine scratched? Lydia's legal pad bent slightly under her fingers. "I do not know," Victor answered before she could say more. "Folders are handled often." Dante turned to Edmund. "Was this one handled often today?" The butler hesitated, and Matteo's eyes moved to him at once. Edmund kept his voice low. "It arrived sealed this morning, sir. I placed it on your desk. Later, Miss Crane asked to take it to the small office for final seal review." Lydia raised her chin. "That is standard." Nora stared at the wrinkled page. "It was not wrinkled when it was inside," she said. Victor's mouth tightened. "Inside what?" Nora pointed without stepping closer. "Inside that folder. Before Miss Lydia took it." Matteo's expression softened too quickly. "Dante, we are giving a frightened child too much room to imagine." Dante placed one hand beside page 12, close enough to claim it, not close enough to disturb it. "No," he said. "We are giving a missing page enough room to explain itself." He looked at Nora. "You said you remembered it because of something on the paper." Nora nodded once. "It would not lie flat," she whispered. There was a little hill on it. Dante's eyes moved to the raised seal at the bottom corner, and for the first time that night, Victor Hale had no sentence ready. The little hill on the paper did not look powerful until every powerful adult in the room had to look at it. Under the brass lamp, the raised wreath seal pressed up from the lower corner of page 12. Faint but clean, a mark made by pressure instead of ink. Nora kept both hands tucked into the sleeves of her cream cardigan, as if one careless touch could ruin the only thing in the study still telling the truth. Dante leaned closer, his face still, his eyes moving from the seal to the fold, from the fold to the page number, from the page number to the black folder that had tried to jump over it. "Show me," he said. Clara stepped closer to Nora, not pulling her back this time, only standing beside her so the child would not have to face the Moretti name, the lawyer, and the brother alone. Nora lifted one small finger and held it above the paper without touching. "There," she whispered. "That is the little hill. My dust cloth caught on it this morning." Victor Hale found his voice again, but it did not sound as smooth as before. "Embossed seals can appear on review copies." Dante did not look at him. "Read the line beneath it." Victor paused. "Mr. Moretti, isolated language can be misleading without the full legal context." Dante's eyes stayed on the page. "Then read it with context." Victor did not move. The silence read louder than he would have. Dante lowered his gaze and read the line himself, slowly, each word landing on the desk like a weight placed where someone had tried to leave an empty space. "Sole controlling interest remains with Dante Moretti." Clara did not understand every legal word, but she understood the way Dante's face lost color under the lamplight. It was not fear. It was recognition sharpened by betrayal. Matteo stood near the fireplace, his expression still arranged into patient concern, but the warmth had left his eyes. "Dante," he said, "one clause does not define an entire property structure." Dante finally looked at him. "No, but the missing clause might." Edmund Price shifted near the study door, and Dante turned toward him at once. "Edmund, you placed this folder on my desk this morning?" The butler straightened. "Yes, sir. It arrived sealed at 8:15. I placed it here before breakfast service." "Did the packet appear complete?" Dante asked. Edmund glanced at the folder, then at the cream-colored tabs. "I did not read the contents, sir, but the tabs were aligned, and the packet appeared full." "Did it leave this room?" The question made the study colder. Lydia Crane's yellow legal pad bent slightly under her fingers. Edmund noticed. Dante noticed Edmund noticing. "Answer," Dante said. Edmund swallowed. "Miss Crane asked to take it to the small office for final seal review. She returned it before noon." Lydia lifted her chin. "That is standard procedure." Nora looked at the page under the lamp. "It was not wrinkled when it was inside," she said softly. Victor turned toward her. "You keep saying inside. You are assuming a great deal." Nora shook her head once. "I am not assuming. I saw it between 11 and 13. She pointed again, this time to the left edge of page 12. "And it had the folder teeth." Dante's gaze moved to the margin. Two shallow dents marked the paper near the edge, spaced evenly, almost hidden by the fold. Nora touched the pocket of her cardigan. "My spelling book has rings," she said. "They leave little bites too." Edmund leaned forward only after Dante nodded permission. He did not touch the page. He looked at the dents, then at the metal clamp inside the black folder. "The spacing appears consistent, sir," Victor answered quickly. "Appears is not proof." Dante picked up a clean letter opener and turned the page slightly by the edge, just enough for the lamp to catch the dents, the raised seal, the fold, the page number, and the ownership clause in one line. "Then give me a better explanation for a draft page with a real seal. My controlling interest clause, page 12 printed at the bottom, and clamp marks that match my folder." Victor had no answer ready. For the first time, the chief lawyer looked less like a man explaining a document and more like a man waiting for someone else to rescue him from it. Matteo's left hand moved toward his cuff, then stopped. Nora saw it. Dante saw Nora see it. Lydia's thumb rubbed the legal pad again, and the blue ink near her nail flashed under the brass light. Dante did not accuse her. He only turned the black folder toward the lamp and said, "If page 12 was held here, the folder will still have something to say." The folder did not answer like a person. It answered in scratches, pressure marks, and one pale strip of paper caught where a careful lie had forgotten to clean. Dante turned the black leather folder toward the brass lamp without lifting the pages, and the metal spine reflected a thin line of light across the desk. Page 11 still sat neatly above page 13, calm enough to look innocent. But near the lower clamp, tucked deep inside the groove, a tiny cream-colored sliver clung to the metal like a piece of silence that had refused to leave. Nora saw it first, then lowered her eyes immediately, because every time she noticed something, the room seemed to become more dangerous for her mother. Dante followed her glance. "Edmund," he said, "photograph the folder exactly as it is." Victor Hale stepped forward with one polished hand half raised. "Mr. Moretti, a paper fiber in a folder proves nothing. Legal packets shed fragments during handling." Dante did not look at him. "Then it should not be afraid of a photograph." Edmund Price opened the records cabinet, removed a small camera, and began taking pictures in careful sequence. The open folder, page 11 beside page 13, the missing cream tab, the scratch near the clamp, and the sliver lodged inside the metal spine. Lydia Crane stood beside the file cabinet, the yellow legal pad pressed to her chest so tightly that its bottom corner bent. "I can reassemble the packet properly," she said. "If the issue is presentation, I can make it clean." Dante's eyes lifted. "Do not clean the folder. A clean lie is still a lie." Lydia's mouth closed. Clara Whitaker stood beside Nora now, her hand resting on her daughter's shoulder, not pulling her back but anchoring her in place. Dante looked at the child. "No guessing," he said. "Only what you saw." Nora nodded and reached into the pocket of her cream cardigan. She pulled out a little spelling notebook with a scratched flower sticker on the cover. When she opened it, the page showed 3 careful numbers in pencil: 11, 12, 13. Beneath them was a crooked drawing of Dante's desk, the side door, the black folder, and a small square labeled paper room. "I was practicing order," she whispered. "I get numbers mixed sometimes. But this morning I remembered because page 12 had the little hill." Matteo gave a soft sigh near the fireplace. "Dante, this is exactly the problem. She is turning a school exercise into a legal accusation." Clara's hand tightened, but Nora did not close the notebook. Dante did not turn toward Matteo. "What happened after Miss Crane took the folder?" Nora swallowed. "I was carrying dust cloths back. The small office door was not closed all the way. I heard the machine that makes long paper sounds." Victor's eyes narrowed. "The shredder." Nora looked at her mother before answering. "I think so." Lydia's voice sharpened, then softened too late. "Children should not stand outside workrooms." Dante turned his head slowly. "Adults should not make children afraid of what they saw." Nora's fingers pressed against the notebook. Dante's voice lowered. "What did my brother say to you?" Clara stepped closer. "Sir, she is only 9. That is why you will stand beside her," Dante said. Then he looked around the study. "No one questions Nora unless Mrs. Whitaker is with her. No one mentions her job. No one turns a child into leverage." Clara blinked at the name Mrs. Whitaker, as if dignity had entered the room so quietly she almost did not recognize it. Nora took a breath. "He did not yell," she said. "He smiled. He said grown-up papers make grown-up trouble. He said if I remembered page 12, people might think Mama took it." Matteo's expression stayed smooth, but his left hand moved halfway toward his cuff and stopped. Dante saw it, then looked back to the folder. "Edmund, remove the sliver with document tweezers. Place it on white paper. Photograph every step." Victor spoke quickly. "That risks contamination." Dante answered without raising his voice. "Then watch. Do not touch." Edmund opened a drawer, took out thin tweezers, and eased the pale sliver from the clamp. It came free slowly, a small torn strip of cream paper with a fresh edge. He placed it on a white sheet beside page 12. The color matched. The thickness matched. The torn angle lined up with the damaged side of Nora's wrinkled page. Nora pointed without touching. That is where the folder teeth bit it. Edmund angled the lamp. The fibers caught the light in the same direction. Lydia looked at the sliver, then looked away. Dante closed the folder with one careful hand, keeping the sliver and page 12 under the lamp. Now, he said, we look where they thought only office trash would tell the truth. The small office beside Dante Moretti's study had always looked too plain to hold a secret. It had pale walls, a copier with one green light blinking in the corner, a locked supply cabinet, a side table for completed packets, and a gray disposal bin marked legal waste only. No family portrait watched from the wall. No leather chair waited behind a desk. It was a room made for paper to pass through quietly, become official, then disappear beneath clean labels. Dante did not let Nora enter it. He kept her beside Clara at the open study door, close enough to see that the adults were checking what she had described, far enough that no one could turn a 9-year-old girl into a search tool. Edmund Price stepped into the small office with the camera in one hand and 2 household witnesses behind him. Dante's voice followed him with the stillness of a locked door. Photograph everything before it moves. Edmund photographed the copier tray, the shredder slot, the gray bin, the side table, the floor near the cabinet, and the narrow path from the study to the paper room Nora had drawn in her spelling notebook. Victor Hale folded his hands, but his calm had begun to look thinner, as if each new photograph removed one layer of polish. Mr. Moretti, office waste is not evidence, he said. It can include drafts, copy errors, blank margins, unrelated notes, and material from several files. Dante looked at the gray bin. Then it should not contain a piece of the page you called irrelevant. Lydia Crane stood just outside the small office, her yellow legal pad still pressed to her chest. Her thumb no longer rubbed the edge. Everyone had learned where to look. Edmund opened the ordinary paper basket first. Envelopes, blank strips, a coffee receipt, the torn corner of a shipping label, nothing with page 12, nothing with the cream color of the missing sheet. Then he turned to the gray legal waste bin. Lydia took one step forward. That bin contains privileged material. Dante turned his eyes toward her. Who used it today? Lydia answered carefully. Legal staff. Mr. Hale. Myself. Housekeeping? Dante asked. The silence arrived before her answer. No, Clara's hand rested on Nora's shoulder. Nora felt that hand tremble once, then steady again. Edmund lifted the inner bag and placed it onto a white cloth on the side table. He used tweezers, not fingers, and began laying scraps beneath the small office lamp. Most of them meant nothing. A blank strip, half of a yellow note, a cut edge from a cover sheet. Then the tweezers stopped. Between 2 white scraps lay a cream-colored corner, and at the bottom of it was the number 12. Nora's breath caught so softly that only Clara felt it under her palm. Edmund placed the scrap beside the wrinkled page under the brass lamp, leaving a clean space between them. A faint blue line crossed the torn corner. Near one edge was part of a signature curve, cut away before it could finish becoming a name. Victor spoke too quickly. A numbered scrap proves only that paper was discarded. Nora looked up. It has the same fold, she whispered. Dante turned toward her with full attention. Nora did not step forward. She pointed from beside her mother. The line across the middle. My page has it too. Edmund angled the lamp. The fold on the scrap lined up with the fold across page 12, as if both pieces had been bent by the same hand on the same day. Lydia looked at the scrap, then looked away. Matteo gave a quiet sigh from the study. Dante, legal preparation is messy. A missing tab, a scrap, some ink, a frightened child. This is not a scheme. Dante did not answer him. He looked at Victor. Who was authorized to discard material from this packet? Victor's face stayed composed. My office oversees the packet. Miss Crane assists under my direction. And Clara Whitaker? Dante asked. Victor's eyes moved toward Clara. Household staff clean near these rooms. It is possible someone without legal training moved something without understanding. Nora stared at the floor. She understood then how fast a page could become a weapon pointed at her mother. Dante's hand came down beside the white cloth, not loud, but final. You will not turn a torn document into a maid's crime. Clara looked up as if those words had returned her name to her. Edmund found another scrap, smaller, with a heavier smear of blue ink. Nora's eyes moved from the scrap to Lydia's thumb, then to Matteo as he adjusted his left cuff. A faint blue mark showed near the clean white edge. Matteo lowered his hand when Dante looked at it. It is ink, Matteo said smoothly. This is an office. Dante looked at page 12, the matching scrap, the legal bin, the blue stain, and the folder that had tried to skip a number. Then bring me the transfer summary for tonight, he said. If this was only office waste, I want to know who stood to gain from the empty space. Dante's request did more than bring another document into the study. It moved the room from suspicion into motive, and motive made every sheet of paper feel heavier than the property map beneath it. Edmund Price did not ask Victor Hale for the transfer summary. He went downstairs himself, past the men waiting in the lower hall, and returned with a clean copy from the conference packet prepared for the evening meeting. He placed it on Dante's desk beside the wrinkled page 12, the matching scrap from the legal waste bin, the pale sliver from the folder spine, and the black leather folder that still jumped from page 11 to page 13. Victor's voice remained smooth, but the smoothness had become work. Mr. Moretti, reviewing the transfer summary without proper counsel may create unnecessary confusion. Dante looked at him. Then I will bring in counsel who did not prepare the confusion. He picked up the desk phone and called an independent attorney who had reviewed Moretti estate matters before, but had no role in the transfer downstairs. When she arrived through the side entrance with a gray document case, evidence sleeves, and a digital recorder, Matteo's face tightened for less than a second before returning to careful concern. The attorney did not ask who had the most power in the room. She asked who found the page, who touched it, what had been photographed, where each fragment came from, and whether the child's mother was present. Dante pointed toward Clara without softening his voice. Mrs. Whitaker stays with Nora. No one questions the child alone. The attorney nodded, turned on the recorder, and began naming each item into the record. Wrinkled page 12, folder missing page 12, paper sliver from the spine, legal waste scrap with number 12, blue ink marking, and transfer summary for the waterfront property. Nora stood beside Clara with her spelling notebook pressed to her cardigan. She did not understand holding companies, controlling interest, or how adults could make a building change hands with paper. But she understood that no one was calling the page trash anymore. The attorney asked for the printer and copier logs from the small office. Lydia Crane said, "Those logs are temporary. They may not show anything useful." Edmund looked at Dante. "They clear at midnight, sir. Not before." Dante gave one small nod. Edmund opened the machine report, and the copier printed a sheet of timestamps and file entries. One line stood out beneath the lamp. 7:42 in the evening, single-page scan, legal tray, letter size, temporary capture. The attorney retrieved the cached image before anyone could overwrite it. On the small screen appeared page 12, clean before it was folded, with the same wreath seal impression, the same page number, the same ownership clause, and the same name, Dante Moretti. Nora leaned forward only an inch. "That is the little hill," she whispered. No one corrected her. The attorney compared the cache image to the wrinkled page, then to the torn scrap. "This was part of the executed packet," she said. Victor answered quickly. "A cached image is not the governing document." Dante looked at the screen, then at the folder. "No. It is the memory of one." The transfer summary came next. Without page 12, the ownership chain bent toward a holding company listed near the back of the packet, plain enough to look harmless. Its managing authority traced back to Matteo Moretti. With page 12 restored, Dante retained sole controlling interest over the waterfront property. Without it, Matteo's company could take operational control after the evening meeting, and the change would look like procedure instead of theft. Clara lowered her eyes, as if numbers that large could still somehow fall on people like her. Nora looked at Lydia. I heard Miss Lydia say make it look clean, she said softly. Lydia's head turned. Victor stepped in at once. That phrase could refer to formatting. Dante placed his silver pen across the transfer summary, blocking the signature line like a gate. Formatting does not need a missing page, a torn scrap, a hidden scan, and my brother's company waiting in the empty space. Matteo's left hand moved toward his cuff, then stopped. Dante looked at him fully. They did not steal a page, he said. They tried to make my name disappear one sheet at a time. The attorney sealed the scan printout. Dante turned toward the hallway camera above the study door. Preserve the printer, the email server, the camera records, and every access log from yesterday evening. Now I want to know who walked this folder out of my study, who opened that office, and who believed a child would be too small to remember page 12. Dante did not move toward Matteo first. He moved toward Nora, because the moment the house records began reaching for the same truth a child had carried in her hands, the child became the easiest person in the room to corner with careful words. Nora stood beside Clara near the study door, her spelling notebook pressed against her cream cardigan, her eyes fixed on the silver pen lying across the transfer summary. She had already given them page 12, the little hill, the folder teeth, the torn scrap, the blue ink, and the sentence she had heard without understanding it. Now the adults were beginning to understand too much, and Dante knew that powerful people often became most dangerous when they started sounding reasonable. Mrs. Whitaker, he said. Clara looked up as if her own name had arrived wearing shoes too fine for the room. You and Nora will sit in the reading room. The door stays open. Edmund stands where you can see him. No one asks your daughter a question unless you are beside her. No one speaks about your employment again. Clara's hand tightened on Nora's shoulder, then loosened. For the first time that night, she was not pulling Nora away from the study. She was being allowed to stand between her daughter and the adults who had made truth feel unsafe. Victor Hale adjusted his cuffs. Mr. Moretti, the child remains connected to a sensitive legal matter. Dante turned only his eyes toward him. Then she will be treated like a protected witness, not a loose end. The words fell across the desk colder than accusation. Matteo's face stayed smooth, but the concern on it had started to look like paint drying over a crack. Lydia Crane stared at the evidence sleeves, her thumb still now that everyone had learned to look for blue ink. Clara guided Nora into the reading room beside the study. Nora sat in a small chair with her feet not quite touching the floor, her notebook resting on her lap, the flower sticker on the cover bent from the pressure of her hands. Dante turned back to the desk. Camera records, he said. Edmund moved to the security panel with the independent attorney beside him. The hallway feed from the previous evening appeared on the monitor in gray light. The study door, the side table, the narrow path toward the small office, the quiet wall where no one was supposed to leave a memory. At 7:39 in the evening, Lydia walked out of Dante's study with the black leather folder held flat against her chest. At 7:40, the image went black. At 7:46, the hallway returned. 6 minutes. Not long enough to seem dramatic. Just long enough for a folder to leave one room, enter another, lose a page, and come back looking clean. Victor spoke carefully. Brief camera gaps are common in large homes. The independent attorney looked at the sealed printer log. They are less common when they match a document scan. Edmund opened the access record for the small office. Lydia's entry appeared first. 1 minute later, Victor Hale's card opened the same door. Victor lifted his chin. I supervise legal preparation. My access is expected. Dante looked from the timestamp to the cached image of page 12. Expected access does not explain an unexpected absence. The attorney asked for the internal email archive. Victor objected before she finished the request, and Dante looked at him until the objection lost its breath. Edmund searched the archive. One message appeared from Matteo Moretti to Victor Hale. Subject line ownership chain. The body was only one sentence. Clean the ownership chain before Dante reviews it. The room became quiet in a new way, as if every polished explanation had suddenly found the edge of a cliff. Matteo gave a small laugh without warmth. That is business language. It means simplify the packet. From the reading room, Nora spoke softly. "That is what Miss Lydia said." Clara leaned closer, but Nora did not leave her chair. She opened her spelling notebook and turned it toward the study. The drawing was crooked but clear. Dante's desk, the side door, the small office, the machine that made long paper sounds, and the place where Matteo had bent down to speak to her. "I did not know what the words meant," Nora said. "I only knew they did not want you to see them." Dante took the notebook only after Clara nodded, then placed it beside page 12, the torn scrap, the scan cache, the camera gap, the access log, and Matteo's email. Nora had not solved the law. She had remembered the path the lie took through the house. Dante looked at the line of evidence across his desk. "This room called her confused," he said. "Now every record in this house is repeating her." Lydia's face changed by less than a second, but it was enough. Dante picked up the silver pen and set it beside page 12, away from the ensign transfer. "Bring everyone back to this desk," he said. "The page disappeared here. The truth will be read here." Dante brought everyone back to the desk without raising his voice, and that made the room feel colder than if he had shouted. The private study looked almost the same as it had when Nora first stepped through the side door, but nothing in it belonged to silence anymore. The black leather folder rested beneath the brass lamp with page 11 still sitting above page 13, neat enough to look innocent if no one had ever learned to count the empty space. Beside it lay page 12, wrinkled, folded, and small but no longer powerless. Matteo Moretti stood near the fireplace, his face arranged into calm concern, though the concern had begun to fit him badly. Lydia Crane stood beside the file cabinet with her yellow legal pad pressed against her chest, her thumb hidden now, too late for that to matter. Victor Hale stood near the leather chair, polished and upright, but the authority in his suit had become another kind of paper, smooth on the surface and thin under pressure. Clara Whitaker stood beside Nora at the open reading room door, one hand resting on her daughter's shoulder. Nora did not stand in the center of the room. Dante did not ask her to. The independent attorney placed the digital recorder on the desk and named the time, the study, and every person present. Then she began laying out the evidence in a straight line, not like an argument, but like a road returning to the place where it had been cut. First came the table of contents listing 13 pages. Next came the folder itself, missing page 12, with the cream tab space gone from between 11 and 13. Edmund Price placed the photographs beside it. The fresh scratch on the metal spine, the pale sliver caught in the lower clamp, and the empty place where a document had been pulled out too cleanly. Victor spoke before the next item touched the desk. "This shows irregular handling. It does not establish intent." Dante looked at him. "Then let intent arrive." The attorney placed Nora's wrinkled page 12 beneath the lamp. The wreath seal impression caught the light. The fold crossed the middle. The blue smear sat near the margin. The ownership clause showed the words that had changed the night. "Sole controlling interest remains with Dante Moretti." Then came the torn scrap from the legal waste bin, the corner printed with the number 12, the same fold line, the matching edge, and part of a signature curve cut away before it could become whole. Lydia looked at the scrap, then looked down. The attorney placed the scan cache printout next. 7:42 in the evening, same page, same seal impression, same clause, before the sheet was wrinkled and hidden near office trash. Matteo gave a quiet breath. A cache file is not a governing document. Dante did not look away from him. No, it is the memory of one. The transfer summary followed, showing the waterfront property moving toward a holding company controlled by Matteo if page 12 stayed missing. Then came the hallway camera record. Lydia leaving the study with the folder at 7:39 in the evening, the screen going black at 7:40, returning at 7:46, 6 minutes. Then the small office access log. Lydia first, Victor 1 minute later. Victor's jaw tightened. "My access was lawful." Dante nodded once. "And now the questions are lawful too." Last came the email from Matteo to Victor. "Clean the ownership chain before Dante reviews it." The words sat on the desk without needing to be loud. From beside Clara, Nora lifted her eyes toward page 12. She did not point at Matteo. She did not accuse Lydia. She only looked at the raised seal and said, "That is the page they told me not to remember." Clara's hand tightened, then steadied. Lydia looked toward Matteo as if waiting for the protection that had been promised in private. Matteo did not look back. He lowered his eyes to his left cuff and pulled the fabric down over the faint blue mark. That was when the mask broke without a confession. Dante saw it. Edmund saw it. Nora saw it, then looked at the floor because she had already carried enough of what adults tried to hide. Dante picked up the silver pen from beside the transfer summary. For 1 second, Victor watched it as if the old order of the room might still return through a signature. Instead, Dante placed the pen beside page 12, away from the empty transfer line. Who decided my name could be erased by removing one page? No one answered. Downstairs, the meeting still waited behind closed doors, but the decision had already changed rooms. Dante looked from Matteo to Victor, then to Lydia, and finally to Clara and Nora. "The transfer does not move tonight," he said. "The real file moves first." The real file moved slowly, because Dante Moretti would not let anyone rush the truth after they had tried to bury it beneath clean paper. The independent attorney placed page 12 under the brass lamp one final time, not inside the folder yet, but beside it, where every witness could see what had been removed. The wrinkled sheet still carried its hard fold, its blue ink smear, its torn edge, and the wreath seal impression at the corner. It looked small on the dark oak desk, but no one in the study saw trash anymore. They saw the page that had stopped a signature, exposed a gap, and returned Dante's name to the place where others had tried to erase it. Edmund Price placed the scan cash printout beside it, then the pale sliver from the folder spine, then the scrap from the legal waste bin with the number 12 still visible. The attorney sealed the incomplete transfer packet in a clear evidence sleeve and spoke into the recorder. "The version presented tonight is preserved as found." Dante looked toward the closed study door, beyond which the meeting downstairs still waited for a transfer that would never happen. "Cancel it," he said. Edmund nodded and left at once. Victor Hale opened his mouth, but Dante lifted one hand, and the lawyer stopped before delay could turn into another polished sentence. "The transfer packet prepared for tonight is rejected," Dante said. "No one corrects it in secret. No one rebuilds it after this room clears. The false file stays false so the record can show who made it that way." Matteo's face had become quiet in a way that no longer looked like concern. "Dante," he said, "family matters should stay inside the family." Dante looked at his brother for a long moment, and the coldness in his face gave way to something older, heavier, and more tired. "You used family to make betrayal sound clean," he said. "You used my office, my lawyer, my staff, and a child's fear to remove my name from my own property." Matteo did not answer. Lydia stared at the legal pad she had held all night as if paper could still hide her. Victor adjusted his cuffs, but the movement looked smaller now that every record on the desk had spoken louder than his title. Dante turned to the independent attorney. "Seal every item. Send copies to outside counsel, the State Bar Disciplinary Authority, and financial investigators. Matteo's authority over the waterfront holding and every related schedule is frozen pending review. Miss Crane's document access is suspended. Mr. Hale is removed from this matter effective immediately." No one shouted. No one had to. The mansion had spent the night obeying paper, and now the paper obeyed the truth. Nora stood beside Clara near the reading room door with her spelling notebook pressed to her cardigan. She did not smile. Children who tell the truth in rooms full of powerful adults do not always feel proud afterward. Sometimes they only feel tired, and afraid the truth will still cost someone they love. The independent attorney came closer, careful not to crowd her. "Your notebook will be copied with your mother present," she said. "Then it goes back to you." Nora looked up at Dante. Her voice was smaller than it had been all night. "Will Mama lose her job?" Clara closed her eyes, because that question had lived beneath every silence she had swallowed in the Moretti house. Dante walked around the desk, past the silver pen, past the restored page, past the folder that had almost taught him to sign away his own name. He stopped in front of Clara and Nora. "No," he said, Your mother will not lose her job because her daughter remembered the truth. Clara opened her eyes, and for once, she did not lower them. Dante turned so everyone could hear him clearly. Mrs. Whitaker, this house owes you and Nora an apology. The words did not fix every quiet humiliation, but they put the first repair in the exact room where the damage had been done. He ordered Clara's employment agreement rewritten with clear wages, paid time off, safe reporting procedures, protection from retaliation, and the right to refuse unsafe instructions involving herself or her child. Then he ordered a new house rule entered into the permanent records. Every concern from staff, household workers, or children would be logged, reviewed, and protected before any person with a title could dismiss it. Nora's spelling notebook was copied as a protected child statement with Clara beside her, then returned to her small hands. She held it as if it had survived the room with her. At the end of the night, Clara did not leave through the side hallway. Dante opened the study door himself, and mother and daughter walked out through the main hall under the same ceiling where men had waited for a transfer that never happened. Behind them, page 12 rested in the restored file, sealed and witnessed. And the Moretti mansion learned that silence was not loyalty. A missing page was not a mistake, and the smallest voice in the room had been the one that kept the truth from being signed away. Your daughter is not missing, sir. She is being hidden. The pen stopped less than an inch above Vittorio Marconi's signature line. For 4 days, the living room of the Marconi mansion had not looked like a living room. It looked like a city that had been taken apart and pinned down. A map covered the long table, crowded with red marks from Newark Penn Station to private airfields, bus terminals, highway exits, hotels, storage lots, marina gates, and every road that could carry an 11-year-old girl away from home. Sophia Marconi's photographs lay between police folders and phone logs, her smile trapped under the chandelier light. Beside them sat a white handkerchief embroidered with her initials in pale gold thread, the one Vittorio had carried since the morning she vanished. Nico Marconi stood close to his cousin's shoulder, quiet, polished, and grief-stricken in all the correct places. "Sign it, Vittorio," he had said moments earlier, his voice low enough to sound kind. "We expand the search beyond New Jersey tonight. Every hour matters." Vittorio had lifted the pen. Then Grace Miller stepped out from the service hallway. She was 8 years old, small in a gray cardigan, with worn Mary Jane shoes and a face so serious it did not belong under the chandeliers. Her mother, Elena Miller, one of the maids, appeared behind her with a folded stack of towels still in her arms and fear already on her face. Grace should have stayed near the kitchen. She should have stayed quiet. In a house like this, children of staff learned which carpets they were not supposed to cross. But Grace crossed this one anyway. She reached the end of the table, wrapped both of her small hands around Vittorio's wrist, and stopped the signature that would send the search farther away from the truth. The police captain frowned as if the child had interrupted a court order. "Little girl," he began. Grace did not look at him. She looked only at Vittorio. "Everyone is looking past the gates," she said. "Nobody is looking behind the house." Then she opened her fist. In her palm lay a strip of pale blue hair ribbon, frayed at one end, its edge stained with dull red dust. The room did not understand it at first. It was only fabric. Small, dirty, easy to dismiss. Then Vittorio looked at Sophia's photograph on the table. In that picture, taken at breakfast the morning before everything broke, Sophia wore the same shade of pale blue tied in her hair. Vittorio's hand lowered slowly, but the pen did not touch the paper. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Grace swallowed. Her fingers trembled, but she did not close them around the ribbon. "By the back steps," she said. "Near the guest house door." The words changed the air. The guest house sat beyond the rear windows, behind the clipped hedges and the narrow stone path, close enough that its roofline was visible from the room where everyone had spent 4 days studying roads leading out of the estate. The police captain straightened. "Mr. Marconi, the guest house was checked." Grace lifted her free hand and pointed toward the dark shape behind the glass. "Not the way people check when they want to find someone." Elena inhaled sharply. "Grace, stop." Nico moved first, not toward the window, not toward the ribbon. but half a step toward Adele, Sophia's nanny, who stood near the side door in a black dress with a ring of keys held tight in one hand. It was the smallest movement in the room. A glance, a pause, a piece of fear passing between two adults who thought the child would miss it. Grace saw it. Vittorio saw Grace see it. He set the pen down without signing. The black tip rolled across the paper and left a thin mark over the line where his name should have gone. Nico recovered quickly, his face folding back into sorrow. Vittorio, she is frightened. The whole house is frightened. A child hears things and turns them into stories. Vittorio did not answer him. He looked at the ribbon, then at the red dust, then through the rear windows toward the guest house that had been sitting behind his own walls while the city map screamed in every other direction. "Nobody leaves this room," he said. The guards at the double doors looked at one another, then obeyed. Grace placed the ribbon beside Sophia's handkerchief as carefully as if she were laying down something alive. For the first time in 4 days, the mansion stopped searching the roads and listened to the little girl who had walked in from the back hallway holding the smallest piece of the truth. The double doors closed behind the guards with a soft click, and the sound made the room feel less like a family home and more like a sealed box. Grace stayed near the end of the table, close enough to see the red pins on the map but too small to understand all the places they named. Elena stood behind her with the folded towels still pressed to her chest, as if the towels were the only thing keeping her hands from shaking. The pale blue ribbon lay beside Sophia's handkerchief, and for several seconds nobody touched either one. Nico Marconi broke the silence with a voice so gentle it made Grace feel smaller. "Vittorio," he said, "this is grief looking for a shape. She is a child. She hears names in the kitchen, sees fear in the halls, and suddenly every closed curtain becomes a secret." Grace looked down at her worn shoes. The words sounded kind, but they pushed her backward without a hand. Elena whispered, "I am sorry, sir. She should not have come in here." Vittorio did not answer Elena. He looked at the police captain. "Bring me the guest house report." The captain opened his folder with the calm of a man who expected paper to end a child's courage. He slid a report onto the table, placing it above the city map and below Sophia's photograph. "The guest house was cleared twice," he said. "No sign of Miss Marconi. No signs of forced entry. No personal items located." Grace stared at the page. She could not read every word from where she stood, but she knew empty spaces when she saw them. Empty spaces were where adults put things they did not want children to ask about. Vittorio picked up the report. "What time?" The captain blinked. "Excuse me? What time did your officers clear the guest house?" The captain looked down at the report as if it might become more specific if he stared at it long enough. "Late evening." Vittorio lowered the page slowly. "Late evening is not a time." Nico stepped closer, his dark suit brushing the edge of the chair. "The exact minute does not change the result." The building was checked. Vittorio's eyes stayed on the paper. "Who from my household witnessed it?" The captain's mouth tightened. "My officers are trained professionals." "That was not my question." The living room seemed to lean toward the table. Vittorio turned the report slightly, scanning the bottom lines. No signature from the butler. No initials from the head guard. No note about the rear entrance. No name of any staff member who had walked through the rooms with the officers. Then his thumb stopped near the page numbers. "Where is the appendix for the rear property structures?" The captain stiffened. "The relevant structures are covered." Vittorio tapped the corner of the report. Page 4 jumps to page 6. Nico gave a tired sigh, soft enough to sound reasonable. "It is probably a clerical issue. We have been moving fast." Grace looked toward the rear windows. "The curtains moved after midnight," she said. Adele's keys touched together near the side door. It was a tiny sound, almost nothing, but the whole room had started listening to tiny things. Vittorio's eyes shifted toward Adele's hand. "Which curtains?" he asked. Grace swallowed. "The heavy ones in the back window." Sophia said they looked like church coats. The police captain exhaled. "Curtains move because of vents, old windows, weather. A frightened child can mistake that for anything." Grace shook her head once. The window was closed. The curtain moved, then stopped like somebody was told not to touch it again. Nico smiled sadly. And you saw this from where, sweetheart? Elena's hand tightened on Grace's shoulder at the word sweetheart. Grace did not look at Nico. From the laundry hall. I was waiting for Mama. I can see the back window when the pantry light is off. Vittorio placed the report beside the ribbon. No exact time. No household witness. No rear entrance note. Missing appendix. A child sees a moving curtain, and the nanny holds the keys. Adele's face remained pale, but the keys no longer moved. The captain reached toward the ribbon. We should secure that properly. Vittorio's hand came down between the captain and the fabric. Not hard. Final. No one touches it. Nico's expression cooled for the length of one breath. Vittorio, this is becoming dangerous. If every staff child can bring scraps into an investigation, the truth will drown in stories. Grace flinched and Elena did too. Vittorio saw both. He looked from Grace to the report, then through the rear windows toward the guest house waiting behind the hedges. A report that names no witness is not a locked door, he said. It is a curtain. Grace lifted one small finger toward the ribbon. I know it is Sophia's, she whispered, because there is something hidden on it. The hidden thing on the ribbon made the room lean closer without anyone taking a step. Grace looked at Vittorio first. Not the police captain, not Nico, not Adele, because the ribbon had come from his daughter and the secret sewn into it belonged to him before it belonged to the room. May I touch it? She asked. The question was small, but it carried more respect for evidence than the report lying beside it. Vittorio nodded once. Grace lifted the pale blue strip by the cleanest corner, careful to keep her fingers away from the dusty edge. She turned it over and used her thumbnail to separate the folded seam near the frayed end. At first, there was only thread and shadow. Then the chandelier light caught something almost invisible. A tiny star stitched into the fabric in blue thread only half a shade darker than the ribbon itself. Vittorio did not reach for it. He bent forward slowly, as if breathing too hard might erase the mark. The room watched his face instead of the ribbon, because that was where the truth arrived first. The color left him in a slow, controlled way. His eyes moved to Sophia's breakfast photograph, then to the handkerchief embroidered with her initials, then back to the star. Who told you about that? He asked. Grace kept her fingers still. Sophia did, she said. At breakfast. She said initials were too serious for hair, so you let her have stars because stars could hide better. Vittorio's hand closed on the edge of the table. He remembered the small shop in Boston, the white box, Sophia laughing because she wanted her things to know her without shouting her name. He remembered telling her that quiet things could still belong to someone. Now that quiet thing lay in front of him, dirty from the back steps of a house that the police report claimed had nothing to say. For several seconds, Vittorio could not speak. Grace saw the silence hurt him, and her courage trembled. Elena stepped closer behind her, but did not pull her away. Nico stepped in with perfect timing, soft enough to sound merciful. A custom ribbon proves it was Sophia's ribbon, not that Sophia is behind the house. The police captain nodded too quickly. Exactly. It could have been dropped earlier, moved by wind, caught on a shoe, carried by anyone. Grace looked at the dusty edge. It was not in the grass, she said. It was on the second back step, caught by the broken corner. The captain looked down at her. And you know that because? Because the back steps are red, Grace said. The front steps are gray. Sophia said the red ones looked like dried cinnamon after rain. The butler, who had been silent near the wall, lifted his eyes. Vittorio turned toward him. Say what you are holding back. The butler swallowed. Sir, the rear steps were swept after the first inspection. I ordered it myself because mud had been tracked through the path. The guest house was locked afterward. No one was supposed to use the back entrance. The police captain's mouth tightened. A household memory is not a chain of custody. Vittorio looked at the missing page in the report, then at the ribbon. Neither is a report with a hole in it. Adele's fingers closed around her keys until the brass pressed into her palm. Grace noticed that one small key had a faint red-brown stain in the grooves near the teeth, the same shade as the dust on Sophia's ribbon. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Too many truths at once made adults look for the weakest one. She only touched the pocket of her gray cardigan, where her little star notebook rested against her side. Vittorio saw the movement. "You wrote something down?" Grace shook her head. "I draw things so I remember them." Nico gave a faint, tired smile. A child's drawing cannot reopen a cleared building. Vittorio did not look at him. He placed the police report on one side of the ribbon and Sophia's handkerchief on the other, turning the table into a line of witnesses. The blue star, the red dust, the missing appendix, the vague time, the silent keys. None of them shouted. All of them waited. "Grace," Vittorio said, "after you found the ribbon, what else did you notice near that part of the house?" Grace looked past the chandelier, past the map, past the adults who had already decided which doors mattered. Her voice fell to a whisper. "There were trays after dinner." Vittorio's eyes sharpened. "What kind of trays?" Grace pressed one hand over the notebook in her pocket. "Small ones," she said. "The kind you bring to someone who is not allowed to come to the table." The word "someone who is not allowed to come to the table" did not accuse anyone by name, but they made every empty chair in the living room feel occupied. Vittorio kept his eyes on Grace, not on Nico, not on Adele, not on the police captain already preparing another reason to dismiss her. "Do not guess," he said. "Tell me only what you saw." Grace nodded and pulled the small star notebook from her cardigan pocket. The cover was bent at the corners, and one page had a faint smear of laundry soap where her thumb had pressed too many times. She opened it carefully, not like an investigator, but like a child trying to keep a frightening memory from changing shape. "After dinner," she said. When Mama folded towels, Miss Adele walked through the side hall, not with the big trays for guests. A small tray, a little milk carton, cookies from the blue tin, soup in the white bowl, and a napkin folded over the top. Adele lifted her chin. "I carry food often. This is a large house." "After 9 o'clock?" Vittorio asked. Adele answered a heartbeat too late. "Sometimes." Nico stepped in before that pause could stand alone. "There have been guards awake all night, Vittorio. People need food during a crisis. Children do not always know who a tray is for." Vittorio turned to the head guard by the double doors. "Do your men receive food trays from the family kitchen after 9? The head guard answered without looking at Nico. "No, sir. Coffee from the security room only." No trays. That left the small tray sitting in the air with nowhere innocent to go. Vittorio looked toward the butler. "Bring the kitchen service log for the last 3 nights." The butler left through the service door, and the silence that followed felt different from grief. It felt like the house was listening to its own walls. Elena stood behind Grace, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, the other still holding the folded towels she had forgotten to set down. Grace looked at the long table. The city map showed highways, bridges, terminals, and water. Her notebook showed a crooked little hallway beside the laundry room. For the first time, the crooked hallway seemed more honest. The butler returned with a leather-bound kitchen log and placed it beside the ribbon, the handkerchief, and the damaged police report. Vittorio opened the book to the first night after Sophia disappeared. Breakfast orders, coffee service, staff dinner, tea for visiting relatives. Then, after 9 o'clock, a pale scar crossed one line. The paper had been rubbed thin, almost torn. Under the erased mark, 2 faint words remained. Small tray. Grace stopped breathing for a second. Vittorio turned to the second night. Another erased line. Same hour. Same damaged paper. The third night, again. 3 small trays the house had tried to erase. The police captain leaned forward. Kitchen books are not official evidence. In a crisis, entries get corrected. Vittorio did not look up. Corrections leave names. Erasures leave fear. Nico's fingers brushed the back of a chair. Or exhaustion. Everyone in this house is exhausted. Grace pointed toward the margin of the log, then pulled her hand back before touching it. "That is where the ink looks fuzzy," she whispered. "Mama says ink gets fuzzy when someone rubs too hard." Elena closed her eyes. She had taught Grace that while checking pantry lists, never imagining the lesson would end up beside a mafia boss's missing daughter. Vittorio turned one page back, then forward again, lining the 3 erased entries beneath one another. "Who approved late service each night?" The butler swallowed. "Adele signed the late lists, sir. The kitchen staff believed it was for family needs." Adele's keys made one sharp sound, then went silent. Nico spoke gently. "Vittorio, be careful. You are letting a child's notebook and a tired kitchen book pull you toward a building that has already been cleared." Vittorio finally looked at him. "Then we will clear the lies before we clear the building." He turned to the room. Soft lockdown. Every exterior gate stays closed. No vehicle leaves. No staff member is searched alone. Everything found is photographed before it is touched. "Mrs. Miller and Grace remain where I can see them." Elena looked up at the words Mrs. Miller, and for one brief second, dignity broke through her fear. Vittorio pointed toward the service hallway. "Check the rear wash bins, the service cart, and last night's kitchen trash. Bring me anything that should not be there." Adele's eyes flicked toward Nico. Nico looked away too late. Then, from the kitchen corridor, a metal cart will squeaked once, rolled half a foot, and stopped dead. The metal cart did not move again until Vittorio gave the order with his eyes. The butler stepped into the kitchen corridor first, 2 guards behind him, and 1 kitchen worker stood beside the stopped service cart with both hands lifted away from it, as if even touching the handle might make her guilty of something she did not understand. Grace stayed exactly where Vittorio had told her to stay, close to Elena, one hand wrapped around the bent cover of her star notebook. She did not try to follow. She did not try to become brave in a way that belonged to adults. She only watched the doorway and listened to the house answer the question she had carried alone. The butler returned less than 3 minutes later with a white cloth spread across both hands. Another kitchen worker pushed the cart behind him. Slower this time, its bad will squeaking in short, nervous breaths. On the cart lay a gray towel pulled from the rear wash bin, a blue cookie wrapper from the tin Grace had named, a small milk carton with the straw hole torn open, and a folded napkin stiffened at one corner with pale yellow soup. The butler placed the white cloth on the table beside the kitchen log. In the center of it lay a silver spoon small enough for a child. This bowl had not been polished clean. A cloudy film of milk still clung to the inside, catching the chandelier light like something that had tried to dry before anyone found it. The police captain spoke before Grace could breathe. "A spoon in a house this size proves nothing." Grace looked at Vittorio for permission. He did not nod like a kind man comforting her. He nodded like a man asking a witness to continue. Grace stepped forward one small step, careful not to touch the table. "That is Sophia's spoon," she said. The captain gave a thin laugh. "Many children have silver spoons." Grace pointed to the handle. "Not with the little S there." The butler turned the handle with the edge of the cloth. Near the curve, almost hidden beneath tiny polished scratches, was a small engraved letter. S. Vittorio's face went still. He remembered Sophia at breakfast holding that spoon like it had opinions, telling him the small one was better because grown-up spoons were too proud. The memory passed over him without softness. It became another piece of evidence. Adele lifted her chin. "Children's things get misplaced." The butler answered carefully. "Sir, Miss Sophia's personal tableware was locked in the pantry after she disappeared. This spoon should not have been under the rear wash sink." The captain's eyes moved to Elena. It was not an accusation spoken out loud, but it landed on her anyway. "Who has access to that pantry?" he asked. Elena's hand tightened around Grace's shoulder. Nico stepped in with sorrow placed perfectly over warning. "No one wants to blame Mrs. Miller, but the kitchen staff had access. Someone could be creating a trail because this family is vulnerable." For one terrible second, Grace understood how quickly the truth could be turned around and made to point at her mother. Vittorio's hand came down beside the spoon. Not loud. Final. You will not turn a child's evidence into a maid's crime. The words struck the room harder than shouting. Elena looked up as if her name had been pulled out of the floor and set back on her shoulders. Grace looked at the milk carton. That milk came this week, she whispered. The butler checked the printed delivery mark near the bottom. 3 days ago, sir. Vittorio's eyes moved to the erased kitchen log. 3 nights. 3 trays. Fresh milk. A spoon from Sophia's locked pantry. A napkin folded into a little roof. Grace saw the napkin and her voice became smaller. Sophia folds them like that when she does not want to finish soup. Adele's face tightened. That is a child's habit, not proof. It is proof that someone with my daughter's things, my daughter's food, and my daughter's habits was being served after 9 o'clock, Vittorio said. The captain tried again, quieter now. Household evidence can be contaminated. Vittorio looked at the report with the missing appendix, then at the spoon. Then my lawyer will preserve it before anyone else teaches it to lie. Nico's hand moved to his silver Marconi tie pin and stayed there half a second too long. Grace noticed. Vittorio noticed Grace noticing. Then Grace turned toward the rear windows, where the guest house sat dark behind the hedges, close enough that the city map suddenly looked useless. Sir, she said, her voice shaking. If Sophia had milk last night, she may still be waiting for breakfast. Grace's words made the guest house stop being a place on the property and become a clock that was still running. If Sophia had milk last night, then Sophia was not only a memory in a photograph or a name in a police report. She was close, waiting, and still within reach. Everyone in the room seemed to expect Vittorio to move toward the rear doors. Nico almost looked ready for that mistake. Adele looked ready for that mistake. The police captain looked ready to call it panic before Vittorio even took one step. But Vittorio did not move. He folded Sophia's handkerchief once, set it beside the blue ribbon, and said, "Call Arthur Bellamy. Now." Nico's face remained careful. "A lawyer will not make the guest house safer, Vittorio." Vittorio looked at him. "No, but he will make sure no one changes what we find." Arthur Bellamy arrived through the side entrance with a black leather case, silver hair combed back, and no wasted expression. He did not ask for comfort. He asked for sequence. Vittorio pointed to the ribbon, the police report with the missing appendix, the erased kitchen log, the spoon engraved with S, the milk carton, the cookie wrapper, and the folded napkin. Arthur photographed each item, named it into his recorder, and placed small markers beside them as if the living room had become a courtroom without waiting for a judge. Grace stood beside Elena near the reading room doors, close enough to see, far enough not to be swallowed by the adults. Arthur opened the security system on the wall console and pulled the rear camera file from the first night after Sophia disappeared. The screen showed the back path in gray shadows, clipped hedges, wet stone, red steps, and the roofline of the guest house. At 9:14, the image went black. At 9:28, it returned. 14 minutes missing. Arthur opened the second night. 9:14 to 9:28, gone again. The third night, the same clean cut. 3 nights, 3 trays, 3 holes in the camera where a person could move without becoming a picture. The police captain spoke too quickly. Security systems fail. Arthur did not look away from the screen. Failures do not keep appointments. Then he opened the police report and placed one finger where page 4 jumped to page 6. The rear property structure's appendix is missing. The captain's jaw tightened. That may be clerical. Arthur removed another page from his case. Then this may also be clerical if clerks have learned how to move money. He set down a document labeled Emergency Rescue Retainer, written as if it were funding for expanded search operations. Beneath the clean language was a clause requiring Vittorio's signature to release a large emergency fund through a trust temporarily administered by Nico Marconi. Then Arthur laid down a second draft. Emergency transfer of operating authority, naming Nico temporary controller if Vittorio was judged emotionally unfit after Sophia's unresolved disappearance. Elena lowered her eyes toward Grace, as if paper could become too heavy for a child to hear. But Grace had already heard the word that mattered. Sign. Her fingers tightened around her star notebook. "Sir," she whispered. Vittorio turned to her. What did you hear? Grace looked toward the linen hallway, not at Nico. I was putting towels back. Miss Adele was there. Mr. Nico said, keep her quiet until he signs. Adele closed her eyes. Nico stepped forward with a wounded look polished smooth. Children repeat pieces of adult conversations without context. Grace nodded once. I only repeated the piece I heard. Arthur placed the retainer, the transfer draft, the missing appendix, the camera gaps, and the erased kitchen log in a straight line across the map. The city map underneath suddenly looked foolish, all those red pins pointing away from the house. Vittorio stared at the documents, then through the rear windows where the guest house sat behind the hedges. His voice came out low and cold. They did not hide my daughter from strangers. They hid her from me until I signed away the family. Nico's hand rose to the silver Marconi tie pin at his throat, and this time he did not stop himself in time. Vittorio saw it. Arthur saw it. Grace saw that the truth had finally become too large for one child to hold. Then Vittorio said, before that door opens, I want every hand that touched the lock. Vittorio's order did not send people rushing toward the guest house. It sent them toward the quiet places where lies forgot to clean up after themselves. Nico watched his cousin with a stillness that no longer looked like grief. It looked like calculation waiting for one wrong move, but Vittorio gave him none. He turned first to Elena and Grace, as if the most important door in the mansion was not behind the hedges, but the one between a child witness and a room full of adults. Mrs. Miller, he said, and the name landed in the room like a shield. You and Grace will stand in the reading room with the doors open. No one questions your daughter unless you are beside her. No one threatens your job. No one moves her out of my sight. Elena's lips parted, but no words came. She guided Grace to the reading room, close enough to see the table, the ribbon, the police report, the erased kitchen log, the spoon, the documents, and the city map that had suddenly become the least honest object in the house. Grace held her star notebook against her chest. She did not look proud. She looked like a child who had carried something too heavy and was afraid the grown-ups might still drop it. The police captain adjusted his folder. Mr. Marconi, this child remains part of an active investigation. Vittorio turned only his eyes toward him. Then treat her like a protected witness. Arthur Bellamy opened his black case and spread a white cloth across the table. Keys, he said. Adele's face tightened. Her ring of keys was placed on the cloth, photographed, and separated one by one under Arthur's small inspection lamp. Most were clean from ordinary use. One brass key, shorter than the others, held red-brown dust deep in the grooves near its teeth. Arthur placed the photograph of Sophia's ribbon beside it. The dust matched the color on the frayed edge closely enough that even the captain stopped pretending not to notice. Adele swallowed. I manage Miss Sophia's rooms. I have many keys. Arthur did not raise his voice. This is not a bedroom key. The butler returned from the security office with the guest house lock log. At first glance, the columns looked neat. Then Arthur angled the page toward the lamp, and the neatness broke. One time had been written over with heavier ink, pressed so hard the paper carried a bruise. The initials beside that entry were missing. The captain said, during a crisis, records can be corrected. Arthur slid the phone records across the map. Corrected after calls? 3 calls from the captain's department-issued phone to Nico appeared in clean black print. Each one placed minutes before the rear camera went dark. Nico's voice stayed controlled. I spoke with law enforcement because my family needed coordination. Vittorio looked at the missing appendix marker, then at Grace through the open glass doors. Show me the back route. Grace opened her notebook with both hands. The drawing was crooked, the kitchen tiles too big, the laundry hall too narrow, the rear door shaped like a school worksheet. But the path was clear. Kitchen, laundry hall, pantry corner, back steps, guest house side door. This is where Mama folds towels, Grace said softly. This is where the pantry light makes the window dark enough to see outside. This is where Miss Adele walked. And this is where I heard the knocks. She touched 3 tiny dots near the drawn window. Arthur placed the missing rear property appendix note beside her page. The structure Grace drew is the one removed from the report packet. Nobody called the drawing childish now. Vittorio placed Sophia's handkerchief beside Grace's notebook and the blue ribbon, and the evidence stopped looking like scattered objects. It became a road home. Grace looked at the city map covered in red pins and whispered. The city map was too big. Sophia was behind the small door. Vittorio closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, the father was still there, but the boss had learned how to wait. Photograph the rear entrance, he told the head guard. Do not open it. Photograph the handle, the lock, the glass, the steps, and the ground. The head guard left with 2 witnesses and returned minutes later holding a camera and a sealed cloth. His voice was careful. Adult footprints outside the rear door, sir. Red soil on the threshold. And on the inside of the glass, 3 small chalk marks, low to the ground. Grace gripped Elena's hand. Adele sat down without being asked. Nico touched his Marconi tie pin, then lowered his hand when he saw Vittorio watching. The guest house door was now surrounded by keys, calls, logs, dust, missing pages, and a child's drawing. Vittorio looked toward the rear windows and said, "That door opens only once, and it opens in front of everyone who claimed it was empty." Vittorio did not take the house to the door first. He took the door back into the room where the lie had been dressed as a search. The living room still held the city map with its red pins, each one pointing away from the estate, away from the hedges, away from the small building that had waited behind them the whole time. Arthur Bellamy placed Grace's notebook in the center of that map, and her crooked line from the kitchen to the rear steps cut across the official routes like a quiet correction. Nico stood beside the fireplace with his sorrow arranged carefully again, but it no longer fit his face as well as it had before. Adele sat near the side door, empty-handed now that her keys lay sealed on Arthur's cloth. The police captain kept his folder closed, because the folder no longer protected him. Vittorio looked at everyone in the room, then at Grace and Elena standing in the open reading room doorway. "We searched the city because someone in this room needed us not to search the house." Nico's eyes narrowed. "You are making accusations in front of staff and a child." Vittorio's answer came without heat. The child heard the truth before the staff were allowed to speak. Arthur turned on his recorder and began laying the evidence across the map. First came the pale blue ribbon, its hidden star facing up. Beside it went Sophia's handkerchief, then the police report that claimed the guest house had been cleared but named no household witness, gave no exact time, skipped the rear entrance, and carried a missing appendix where the rear property structures should have been. Next came the kitchen log, open to 3 erased lines after 9 o'clock, the faint words "small tray" still trapped under the damaged paper. The blue cookie wrapper, the fresh milk carton, the roof-folded napkin, and the silver spoon engraved with S followed. Grace watched without stepping forward. The things she had noticed were speaking for her now. Arthur added the security stills. 9:14, black screen. 9:28, picture restored. The same 14-minute cut on 3 nights. Then he placed the photograph of Adele's dusty brass key beside the photograph of the red dust on the ribbon. The altered lock log came next, then the phone records showing calls from the captain's department-issued phone to Nico minutes before each camera blackout. Last came the emergency rescue retainer, the large fund hidden behind search language, and the draft transfer of authority that would have placed temporary control in Nico's hands if Vittorio signed while drowning in grief. The captain cleared his throat. "This is not an official proceeding." Arthur looked at the recorder. "That is why every word is being preserved." Nico gave a small, wounded smile. "Vittorio, grief can arrange accidents into a story." Grace looked down at her notebook. Her finger found the 3 dots she had drawn by the rear window. "The knocks came from here," she said. 3 times. Adele's face changed before she could stop it. Nico did not look at her. That was the moment the room understood what kind of loyalty he had sold her. Useful until visible, protected until exposed. Vittorio saw it and did not give Nico the gift of anger. He turned to the head guard. "Captain's phone on the table. No one touches evidence except Arthur. Mrs. Miller stays with Grace." Butler photographed the lock again. Adele's key opens the door, but Arthur names every witness first. The rear doors opened to the cold path. The walk to the guest house felt longer than every highway on the map. Red soil marked the stone steps. The glass held 3 pale chalk marks on the inside, low enough for a child's hand. Arthur named each witness into the recorder. The butler lifted the camera. Adele's brass key turned in the lock with a soft click that made Elena close her eyes. Vittorio placed one hand on the doorframe, steadying himself before becoming only a father. "Sophia," he said, low and careful. "It is Papa." For one breath, the guest house stayed silent. Then from somewhere inside came 3 faint knocks. The 3 knocks were so faint that nobody moved at first, because every person on the path understood what they meant. They were not rumor. They were not a child's drawing. They were not grief arranging accidents into a story. They were an answer from inside the room that the whole mansion had been trained not to hear. Vittorio did not open the door until Arthur Bellamy confirmed. Recorder running. Witnesses named. Lock photographed. Only then did Vittorio push the door inward with one steady hand. The guest house smelled of closed curtains, old wood, cold milk, and silence that had been kept too carefully. A lamp glowed on the side table. Beside it sat a blue cookie wrapper, a half-finished milk carton, and a napkin folded into a small roof. Vittorio saw the napkin before he saw his daughter, and his face changed because Grace had been right about even that. A narrow hallway door opened a few inches. Sophia Marconi stood behind it in an oversized sweater, pale and tired, but awake, breathing, and holding the white handkerchief with her initials pressed to her chest. For 1 second, Vittorio Marconi, the man people feared to disappoint, could not speak. The cold left his face first, then the power, then the mask that had kept him standing for 4 days. "Papa," Sophia whispered. Vittorio crossed the room slowly, careful not to frighten her, then dropped to one knee and opened his arms. Sophia stepped into them, and the whole estate seemed to exhale through the open door. He did not ask who had done it. He did not turn toward Nico. He did not make his daughter's first safe breath part of anyone else's punishment. He only held her and said, "I am here. You are coming home." Grace stood outside beside Elena, her star notebook pressed against her cardigan. She did not smile like someone waiting for praise. She looked like a child finally seeing adults carry the truth without dropping it. Sophia looked over Vittorio's shoulder and saw her. "You heard me?" she asked. Grace nodded. 3 knocks. Sophia closed her eyes, and the tears came quietly, the kind that did not need to explain themselves yet. Arthur made sure they did not have to. He photographed the lamp, the folded napkin, the inside chalk marks, the rear window, the hallway door, the milk carton, and the small table. The blue ribbon was placed in a sealed sleeve, then shown to Sophia only long enough for her to nod. Back in the living room, the map still lay covered in red pins pointing away from home. Vittorio returned with Sophia wrapped in his charcoal overcoat and holding his hand. Nico stood near the fireplace, trying to rebuild sorrow on his face one piece at a time. "She is frightened," he said softly. "She may not understand what happened." Sophia's fingers tightened around her father's hand. Vittorio did not answer Nico. Arthur placed the evidence across the map one final time. The ribbon with the hidden star, the report without witnesses, the missing rear property appendix, the erased kitchen log, the spoon engraved with S, the fresh milk carton, the camera gaps, Adele's dusty key, the altered lock log, the phone calls, the emergency rescue retainer, and the draft transfer of authority. Then Sophia spoke in a small, clear voice. "Adele said I had to stay quiet until you signed." Adele covered her mouth. Nico did not look at her. That silence finished what the evidence had started. Vittorio did not order revenge. He ordered records. He voided the transfer draft in front of witnesses while Arthur recorded it, ordered the emergency fund frozen for review, suspended Nico's authority, sealed the related accounts, and sent copies of the evidence to outside investigators and the county prosecutor's office. Adele's keys, statements, and lock records were preserved. The captain's department-issued phone was secured through legal process outside his own chain of command. Then Vittorio turned to Elena and Grace. Elena still stood near the reading room doorway, as if years of service had taught her body to take up less space than it deserved. Vittorio walked to her with Sophia beside him. "Mrs. Miller," he said, loud enough for every guard, relative, lawyer, and servant to hear. "This house owes you and your daughter an apology." Elena's chin trembled, but she did not lower it. Vittorio looked at Grace. "My men searched every road and missed the truth at our own back door. Grace did not." Grace held her notebook tighter, suddenly more afraid of praise than doubt. Vittorio understood. He did not offer money to cover shame. He ordered Elena's contract rewritten with clear wages, paid time off, protection from retaliation, and the right to refuse unsafe instructions. Grace's notebook would be copied only as a protected child statement with Elena present, then returned to her. Grace would not face reporters, cameras, or repeated questioning for anyone's reputation. Sophia touched Grace's sleeve. "Why did they not listen sooner?" Vittorio looked at the service hallway, then the front doors. "Because this house taught the wrong people to speak first," he said. By evening, a new rule was written into the Marconi household. Every warning would be recorded, checked, and protected, whether it came from family, staff, guards, or a child in worn Mary Jane shoes. And when Grace left with her mother, Vittorio opened the front doors himself while Sophia stood beside him, because the house that had searched every road had finally learned to listen at home.